0 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds. The day I gave a ride to the Apache widow began the way most days do on a high desert. Ranch quiet, wind-scraped and honest, with the smell of dust and sage clinging to the air like a promise you don't yet understand. I was a rancher by trade and by temperament. The kind of man who learned early that horses listen better than people and that the land remembers every step you take on it. My spread sat where the plains begin to wrinkle into red hills, a place cut by dry arroyos and old trails, some of them older than any 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 31 seconds fence line I ever nailed. That morning, I saddled my bay gallon cruise. Before the sun cleared the ridge, cinching tight and checking the leather with the same care my father taught me, because a careless knot can cost you more than pride out here. I had a long ride planned, checking a broken section of fence near the cottonwoods and moving a pair of strays back toward the south pasture, and I was content. In the rhythm of it, the steady creak of saddle, the patient roll of Cruz's gait, the world narrowing to hoof beats and 0 hours, 1 minute, and 3 seconds horizon. That's when I saw her standing near the old trading road with her headscarf pulled low against the wind, one hand resting on a small bundle, the other steadying herself as if the ground itself might slip away. She wasn't dressed like the tourists who sometimes wandered through chasing sunsets. There was purpose in her stillness, a gravity that stopped me mid-ride. When I drew closer, I saw grief carved into her face with a dignity that made me lower my eyes without thinking. She spoke softly, her English careful but clear, and asked 0 hours, 1 minute, and 35 seconds if I was riding north toward the river crossing. I told her I was, and she nodded once, as if the answer confirmed something she already knew. Her name was Ayana. She was Apache, a widow, and she had lost her horse 2 days before when it broke a leg in a wash and had to be put down. The law she spoke of was not written on any paper I'd ever read, but it was older than the trail beneath our feet, and I would learn too late how binding it could be. At the time, I only saw a woman stranded by fate and a road that didn't forgive delays. Offering her 0 hours, 2 minutes, and 8 seconds a ride felt like breathing, natural, and necessary, so I dismounted, loosened Cruz's cinch, and helped her up behind me, careful to give her space, mindful of respect. The moment she settled, the world shifted, though I couldn't have told you how. Cruz stepped forward, and with that step, a line was crossed. We rode through the heat and into the afternoon, the land unfolding and wide, unforgiving beauty, moss-keyed shadows, the rattle of cicadas, a hawk spiraling above. And she told me pieces of her story in the pauses between hoof 0 hours, 2 minutes, and 41 seconds beat-ats. Her husband had died in a river accident the previous spring, swept away while helping others cross during a sudden flood, a man remembered for his steadiness and his courage. She was traveling to stay with her aunt near the river, a journey she had made many times before, but never alone. I listened because listening is what you do when someone trusts you with their pain, and because there was something in her voice that made silence feel like respect rather than absence. When we reached the crossing, the river was low and 0 hours, 3 minutes, and 11 seconds forgiving. And I helped her down, offered water, and thought that was where our paths would part. But she looked at me then with a seriousness that tightened my chest and said quietly, "That by Apache law man who carries a widow by horse who shelters her body with his own Anna. Long Red accepts responsibility that does not end at the river bank." I laughed at first, not out of mockery, but disbelief because I had never heard such a thing and the idea seemed too heavy for a simple act of kindness. She did not smile. She 0 hours, 3 minutes, and 44 seconds explained that among her people a widow is protected by custom. When a man takes her onto his horse and rides with her as one, he signals to the community his willingness to be her keeper, her husband, her home. Especially if the journey is necessary and undertaken without witnesses to contradict the bond. I told her I was just a rancher, that I meant no harm, that laws like that couldn't touch me here, but the land around us seemed to listen and disagree. She did not accuse me. She informed me the way one informs a man 0 hours, 4 minutes, and 15 seconds that the storm he sees on the horizon is already upon him. When we parted, there was a weight in my chest that didn't lift. And as I rode back toward my ranch, the sky darkened with clouds that hadn't been there that morning. Days passed and the story didn't leave me. It followed me into the barn, into my sleep, into the way. I checked the fence line with the patience sharpened by unease. Then the visitors came, elders from her community. Their presence calm and unyielding, their words respectful and firm. They spoke of the ride, of the 0 hours for minutes and 46 seconds law, of the bond formed by necessity and honor. And they did not threaten, they reminded. I argued, stumbling over logic that fell thin against tradition. But I also listened, because something in me recognized the truth of responsibility when it stands before you without raising its voice. They left me time to consider, time to understand that the choice I thought I had already made had been made. The moment I offered my saddle that night, I saddled Cruz again and rode out beneath a sky stitched with stars. Thinking about what it means to 0 hours 5 minutes and 18 seconds be a man when the land and its people ask something of you that changes your life forever. If this story has already pulled you into the dust and the dilemma, stay with me. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Because the ride I gave to an Apache widow was only the beginning. And the law that bound us would test my heart, my courage, and my understanding of love in ways I never imagined. I rode to the river at dawn 3 days later with a heart heavier than any saddle I'd ever lifted. The kind of weight that 0 hours 5 minutes and 50 seconds doesn't show in your hands, but bends your spine all the same. Because once a man understands the truth of what he's done, there's no riding away from it, only riding toward whatever comes next. The Ellers' words echoed in my mind with the rhythm of Cruz's hooves. Not as a threat, but as a mirror held steady in front of me. And in that mirror I saw myself clearly for the first time. Not just a rancher guarding fences and cattle, but a man who had stepped into a living law written in breath and blood and memory. The river 0 hours 6 minutes and 19 seconds lay quiet when I reached it, mist curling low like a held breath. And there she was, Ayana, standing near the cottonwoods with the morning light soft on her face. Her grief no longer sharp, but deep like water that has learned how to be still. She did not look surprised to see me. She only nodded the way someone nods when a story continues exactly as it must. We did not speak at first. Words would have been clumsy there. I dismounted, loosened Cruz's tack, and let the silence do its work. Because some truths arrive only when you 0 hours 6 minutes and 49 seconds give them room. When I finally spoke, I told her I had come to understand that I did not see her law as a trap anymore, but as a promise I had made without knowing the language yet, and that if staying meant staying fully honor, home, and heart, then I would not stand halfway in the doorway of her life. She steadied me for a long moment, searching not my face, but something behind it, and then she said that among her people, love is not always loud at the beginning. Sometimes it grows from duty the way grass grows from hard ground. 0 hours 7 minutes and 20 seconds slow and stubborn and real. She told me she had prayed for clarity, not for escape, and that if I had not returned, the law would still stand in her spirit, even if the world looked the other way. That was when I realized this wasn't about being forced. It was about being chosen by consequence, about becoming the man your actions already say you are. We rode together again that day, not because we had to, but because we wanted to feel the truth of it in our bones. This time she rode beside me on a quiet chestnut mare borrowed from her 0 hours 7 minutes and 49 seconds aunt. Our horses moving in an easy rhythm that felt like conversation without words. The land opening wide around us. Red earth, open sky, the smell of warm leather and sage. And I found myself noticing the way she smiled when the mare picked her way carefully over stones. The way her laughter surprised both of us when the wind cut her scarf and tried to steal it. Romance, I learned then, doesn't always arrive like lightning. Sometimes it's the steady warmth of the sun when you finally stop bracing for cold. Days 0 hours 8 minutes and 21 seconds turned into weeks, and the decision settled into action. I brought her to my ranch, not as a guest, but as a partner, and the land seemed to recognize her the way it recognizes rain after drought. She learned the rhythms quickly. How to read a horse's mood by its ears. How to move through the barn without startling the cattle. How to stand with me at dusk and count the herd with a quiet confidence that eased my shoulders. At night, we talked by lamplight about the lives we had lived before. About her husband and the kindness that still 0 hours 8 minutes and 51 seconds lived in her memories. About my father and the way he taught me that a man's word is a fence. You don't step over once it's said. There was tenderness in those conversations. A careful respect that made our growing closeness feel earned, not rushed. The first time I reached for her hand, it was after a long day repairing fence under a hard sun, our fingers dusty and tired. And when she laced hers through mine, the simple brightness of it settled something deep in my chest. The elders came again, not to judge, but to 0 hours 9 minutes and 21 seconds witness. And under an open sky, with horses standing calm nearby, we honored both worlds, the ranch and the tribe, with vows spoken plainly and honestly. There was no spectacle, only meaning. She taught me that love in her,